Okay, we are going to look at comparing and ordering real numbers. So in this first example, we want to decide on this given number line, where would the square root of 3 be located? Now, the first thing that you're going to want to do is actually type in the square root of 3 into your calculator. This is going to give you the approximate decimal value of it. So when you do that, you should get about 1.73. Okay, now, if you notice on the number line, it goes from 1 to 2, and each marking goes up by 0.1. Okay, so 1.73 is going to be bigger than 1.5, which means answer choices W and X are definitely out. Okay, so if that is 1.5, we then have 1.6. This would then be 1.7, which then means that answer choice Y would be the closest to 1.73 or the square root of 3. Now in example number 2, we are given 5 problems where we need to decide if the values are less than, greater than, or equal to each other. Now in example number 1, we have both whole numbers, so we don't need to type anything into the calculator. -5, we're comparing that to -7. Right? Now, -5, if you think about a number line, is closer to 0 on the number line than -7 is, which means that -5 is greater than -7. In number 2, we have the square root of 2 and 3/2. Now, both of those you're going to need to type into the calculator and get the approximate decimal value of it. So the square root of 2 is going to give you 1.414, and 3/2 is 1.5. Okay. So now we're just comparing those two values. 1.414 is less than 1.5. Okay, so that means the square root of 2 is less than 3/2. Now in number 3, 4.3 is just a regular number. We do not need to type that into the calculator. 4.3, this bar above it, just means that that value is repeating. Okay, so it's really 4.333, which would go on forever. Okay. Now, in comparing these numbers, you need to compare the decimal places. So our whole numbers are the same. They're both a 4. In the tens place is a 3. Now, this here would stop. It's just 0.43. The next value is actually a 0 there. We just don't have it written. The next value in this would actually be another 3 because it's repeating. So if I compare the 0 and the 3 that would come next, this 4.3 would be less than 4.3 repeating. Okay, so sometimes you might need to add your own digits in. Same thing in number 4, 2/9. If you type that into your calculator, you always want to turn these into a whole number or decimal. 2/9 is the same as 0.2 repeating, which then would obviously be equal to 0.2222 repeating. Okay, so number 4 will be equal to each other. Now in number 5, we have a -15/4, which when we put that into the calculator is going to give us a -3.75. So you would just need to type in 15 divided by 4 in order to get that decimal. And then we also have the negative square root of 21. So again, you need to type that into the calculator. The square root of 21 is going to give you a -4.58. Okay. Now again, remember with negatives, you want to decide which one is closer to 0. Okay, whichever one is closer to 0 on a number line is actually the larger of the value. So -3.75 would be closer to 0 than -4.58, which means that it is greater than. Okay. Now in example number 3, we are placing these values in order from greatest to least. Okay, so we are given 4.3 repeating. We are given the square root of 19, 15/4, pi, and 4.3. Okay, now the first thing you always want to do with these ordering is put any of them into decimal form that are not already in that form. So 4.3 repeating, we don't need to do anything to change it other than you can write out the 3's that are repeating if you would like to. Square root of 19, you will need to type that into your calculator to get the approximate decimal value. So we have 4.3589. 15/4, same thing. 15 divided by 4 in your calculator would give you 3.75. Then our value of pi, we should know, is 3.141. And then 4.3 is still just going to stay as 4.3. You can add a 0 or 2 onto the end of it if you would like. Okay. So now we're going to compare these decimal values. Okay. What is very, very important with these, your final answer, you need to write the original values that were given to you. Okay, your final answer should always be the original values. The decimal equivalents are just what we're using to help us get to the final answer. So we're going greatest to least in this one. So the largest would be our square root of 19, which is 4.3589. That is the largest of all of our values. Next would be 4.3 repeating. Then the 4.3, 15/4 would come next, and then the smallest out of this group would be your pi. Okay. Now we want to look at, what if those values were negative? How would that change your answer? So what we're asking is, if each one of these were actually a negative value instead of positive, how would that change this answer? Okay. The only thing that would change is that you would completely reverse the order. The smallest value would now be your largest value if they were negative. Okay. So it would completely switch your order. Now in this example here, we have, suppose that -1 is less than x, which is less than 0. We want to know which of the following expressions would have the smallest value. Okay. Now with these, and these are going to be very important, you're going to see these a lot. You need to decide what this value of x is. You can pick anything that makes this inequality true. Okay, so we need a value for x that is smaller than 0, but bigger than -1. So you can pick anything between -1 and 0. Okay, and this is where you're going to have some choices. Okay, now we chose to use -0.5 for these. Okay, again, you could use -0.4, -0.3, -0.2, -0.7, -0.8, whatever you choose, as long as it is between 0 and -1. Okay, you're going to then go through and plug that value that you chose, so in this case -0.5, and you want to put it into each one of these answer choices. Okay, now remember, our goal was to have the smallest value at the end. So when we plug it into letter choice A, we end up with 0.4 as our answer. In answer choice B, we end up with -0.4 as our answer. In answer choice C, we end up with 0.85. And then in answer choice D, we end up with -0.85. Okay. Now I think there is a typo on this. We have answer choice C circled for which is actually the largest value. And the question is asking for the smallest value. So this is going to be a little bit of a typo on this answer choice, but that's okay. So now our smallest one, which is going to be the one that is furthest away from 0, is actually going to be answer choice D, which is -0.85. Okay. Now last one. We are putting the following expressions in order from least to greatest. Okay, so now we're going from the smallest to the largest. And we are told that, again, x has to be between -1 and 0. So as soon as you see these, you are going to need to pick your own x value. Again, any number will work as long as it is between -1 and 0. Okay, so you need to make sure you're looking at what this inequality is so that you know which numbers will work. So we are given 4.3 repeating times x. Then we have x times the square root of 19, 15/4 times x, pi times x, and then 4.3 times x. Again, our inequality is -1 is less than x, which is also less than 0. So we need the number that is between -1 and 0. You can choose whichever you would like. We ended up deciding to go with -0.5. Okay, and that is between -1 and 0. Now, just like the previous example, you need to take that value that you chose and plug it into each one of those original expressions to get a number value. So when we plug in negative 0.5 times 4.3 repeating, we end up with negative 2.16. Negative 0.5 times square root of 19, negative 2.179. So you're going to plug in that value into each one of these original expressions and get a value for it. Then you're going to look at those values and put those in order from least to greatest. Okay, now again, with the ordering problems, your final answer needs to go back to your original expression. So these values here we are just using to help us get to our final answer. Okay, but we need to be sure that we are using the original expressions. So now the least to greatest, our smallest is going to be our x times the square root of 19 because that gave us negative 2.179, which is smaller than all of the other values. Up next, we have 4.3 repeating times x, then 4.3 times x, 15/4 x, and then pi times x. Okay, so that is comparing and ordering real numbers.